And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about...
That was my line, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeVille. And sequels.
Yeah, you don't say...
Sorry.
What kind of a geek are you?
Let's go again.
You're listening to the Social Geek Scene podcast. Your scene for all the geek things.
Welcome back, everyone. As always, I'm Sam.
And I'm Jeremiah.
And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about...
Reboots.
Remakes.
Sequels.
And prequels.
Oh, my.
Oh, my goodness. In today's movies, TV shows, we're not seeing too much original content coming out. We're either seeing a movie being rebooted, starting over, a movie being doing a remake. Maybe it was a cartoon before, now it's live action. And now we're getting tons and tons of sequels.
Lots of sequels, and when we run out of sequels, then we get some prequels.
Yeah, what were they like when they were a child, you know? But actors aren't just signing on to do one or two movies these days. It's usually five or six.
Multiple films.
If we look at the Marvel films, he's got this Captain America Civil War will be Chris Evans' sixth time playing Captain America, and he's not done yet, as far as we know. We'll see what happens. But so today we kind of want to talk about the difference between, some of these things. What constitutes a reboot, and maybe what's different in a remake, because they're not exactly the same thing.
Not the same thing, but they're similar.
Right.
Could be confusing. We want to educate ourselves and you just a little bit.
Because there's so many of them happening. Sometimes we see movies that were made 20 years ago. They're doing that character again, or actually in the past 3 to 5 years they're already starting over.
Right.
So it's something that's very prevalent in movies today.
Right. So Sam, what exactly is? Let's start with a remake. What is a remake?
Well, a remake, it's different from a reboot.
Right.
In that you're not starting completely over with a character or a story. You've seen this character before, maybe in a movie or on a TV show, so there is some source material for you to use. Okay. You're not just wiping the slate clean.
Okay. And
so you're using some of that source material. You don't necessarily have to do their origin story again. A prime example, I think, some people are calling this a reboot, but I would call it a remake, would be the new Spider-Man that's showing up in Civil War, and that is going to be now played by Tom Holland, previously played by Andrew Garfield, and before that, Tobey Maguire. Now, Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield, that would have been a reboot, starting completely over, new direction, new story.
Right.
But we've seen that happen already. So I think with this new Spider-Man, it's a little bit more of a remake. Yes, they're recasting him, but they're not doing an origin story. We've seen that. We've seen a lot of these villains. We don't need necessarily to start completely fresh or over with that, but let's just take what we've done so far, but just go in a new direction.
Okay.
We're just building upon what's already been done.
Right, which Marvel, they have the comics, they have the other movies, which still told the storyline, the origin story. We still understand where Spider-Man comes from with all of that. So obviously, if they might, reference it in the solo Spider-Man film,
right?
But we're already just jumping in. We're saying, you guys know who Spider-Man is. We know who Spider-Man is. Here's just a remade version of Spider-Man in our universe now.
Right.
Kind of an adaptation, if you will.
Right. Now, a reboot, you're starting completely over. You're not necessarily using the canon source material.
Right.
One prime example of that would be the recent Man of Steel movie. Now, Zack Snyder, the writers, they kind of started fresh with the character.
Yeah, and let's talk about how it's a little bit different than Superman Returns versus Zack's Man of Steel.
Right.
So are they both remakes? Are they both reboots? Is one
I would
one
say
or the other?
Superman Returns was a sequel to the Christopher Reeves Superman.
Okay.
But it happened so many years later, they recasted all the characters, but used that as canon.
Okay.
Those
okay.
movies that everything that happened in those movies, they say that is the source material for this Superman. We're just using someone else other than Christopher Reeves.
So this falls into a remake.
A remake / sequel.
Okay.
Okay.
And then now we're at Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and now we are rebooting the character of Superman.
A brand new universe. The origin story is actually a little bit different than in previous Superman movies that we've seen in some of the comic books. There's no Fortress of Solitude.
Right.
Krypton looks so much different. And actually there wasn't a natural birth on Krypton in centuries. That's different, that they were all kind of made like the Matrix. Everyone's in tubes and just being made in a bubble, in a little box, something like that. So it's kind of going in its own new direction. So I would say that's a reboot.
Yeah.
Another example of a reboot would be the latest Fantastic Four movie, which unfortunately did not do so well with viewers and critics, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
We first had a Fantastic Four movie and a sequel featuring the Silver Surfer in the sequel. And, that was kind of more near the beginning of we're getting all these new superhero movies with Spider-Man, the X-Men movies. So, they were just starting out, trying to figure it out. And now they rebooted it with this brand new cast, new origin story. And unfortunately, it didn't do so well.
Did not.
So the question will be, will they eventually reboot it again?
Reboot.
But we don't necessarily need to see this origin story, or was the origin story so bad that they're going to have to reboot it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was watching it, I thought the origin story was very solid.
Okay.
I feel like towards the end, the movie kind of went south with some of the action sequences, and it was just kind of like, what is going on here? What are we doing? So I feel like they don't need to reboot it. I think they maybe just need to get a new director and, maybe just do a remake in a different direction, but keep all the cast, because I thought the cast did a great job. I think it was just out of their hands with maybe the director or the storyline, but I think you can salvage it. You don't need to reboot it again, but maybe just like take a hard left turn and get it back on track.
Right. I think the big thing with these reboots and remakes, what's causing them is the story writing. The reason why you might need a reboot is because the story really wasn't going anywhere, or they had some trouble making it work, trying to figure out the direction they wanted to take. And I think that's what happened with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, is that the story that they were writing just didn't seem to resonate with people, or it didn't fit. They were trying to put too much into the movie. And so now you're kind of forced with a decision. Do we try and salvage this, or do we wipe the slate clean and start over? And, that's kind of, they made that deal with Marvel, which everyone was super excited about, to maybe not kind of start over, but just go in a new direction that fit within the context of the greater, larger Marvel universe on TV, in the movies.
Right. And I think that's great Marvel is a prime example, because everyone seeing Marvel films are mostly very familiar with these characters in the comics.
Right.
So we don't really have to retell the same origin story in the story. We just have to continue it in a way that honors those origins.
Right.
So I feel like if storytellers are trying to get these stories across, that the best thing that they can do is just try to make the best story they can with these characters that honor that original source material. I don't really love the idea of rebooting all of these original ideas that are kind of set in this comic book canon. I think it's great if they use that as kind of like, this is our framework. It's not our rule book, but it is our framework. And we can play with these ideas that have been set before us And we can stretch, we can still, have room to grow, but I feel like you need to have a framework to have those core principles and ideas of these characters, which are pretty ironclad. You're not going to see Spider-Man like breaking any massive crazy rules because you know who Spider-Man is.
Right, exactly. Another reboot that came out recently that I wish they hadn't rebooted it in this way, should have left it alone, was Terminator Genesis. Okay. Now, they kind of took the best two movies in that whole franchise is Terminator, the first one, and then Terminator Judgment Day. We can all agree on that. Now, what a lot of I think people tend to do these days is use time travel to kind of have some liberty. And
time travel is the big writing loophole.
Right. And so what they did do is in this movie, they went back in time and instead of using the first two movies as a framework, they completely changed them as if they didn't happen.
Yes.
Why did you? I don't get that. Those two things didn't need to be changed. That's something I felt like you could just build upon and continue the story.
Right.
Now, another example that did that recently is the new Star Trek movies. Is I wouldn't call that a reboot necessarily.
Right. Yeah, I think because they did do the time travel, the alternate timeline, but they didn't steer away from the original because they had
the canon.
Right, because they had Spock in it.
Yeah, Leonard Nimoy appeared as Spock, and that kind of gave it ties to the original movies. Like, this isn't separate. It's a part of that world. It's just we're going in a new direction.
Right. It is. It's a younger cast. It's all revamped. So they're not saying Kirk has a different origin story. They actually gave him an origin story, which was kind of foggy in the other ones. So they kind of just did the best that they could and just filled in some of the gaps. They had the Kobayashi Maru scene.
Kobayashi Maru, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how to say that. But they had that scene, which was like one of the pivotal Kirk, moments in his past that he beat the test that was unbeatable.
Right.
And they kept that. They just showed you. And I thought that was great because we've always heard about it from all these other movies, like Kirk's awesome because he beat this test that no one could beat. And we actually got to see it. So they're not throwing away the source material. They're actually bringing it in and showing you and telling you and, almost diving you deeper into the Star Trek source material, which is pretty cool.
It's not that Star Trek needed to be rebooted. It just needed to be taken in a new, fresh direction.
Right.
And that's why I would classify it as a remake while continuing to use the source material.
Yeah. And thank you, J.J. Abrams, for giving us those first two Star Trek films. I wish you were on the third one, but...
Hey, we got him in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And
for one movie.
Yes. And speaking of Star Wars, that's a franchise that loves doing sequels.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and now we're waiting on episode 8.
Yes. Well, I would say, are they sequels or are they trilogies? Because you had 4 through 6. That's a trilogy, but then they said, we need some prequels.
Right.
Let's do a trilogy prequel, and let's do another trilogy, and then let's fill in the gaps with Rogue One. Let's go back and do a prequel, fill in the gap Star Wars story film. So they're kind of all over the place, but they're Star Wars. So
I feel like, with sequels today, there is so much more story to be told with these movies and these characters. You don't just stop after one movie, maybe just a second movie.
I mean, not if you don't make money off of it.
Right. That's true. But as we said earlier with the Marvel movies, there's such a big world with these characters and the source material, the canon with comic books and novels. They're just really they're letting you get to know these characters over time. It's not something that you rush. And you learn to fall in love with these characters, appreciate what they're going through, the decisions that they make. And I know with the Dark Knight trilogy with Christian Bale, they really flushed that out, Yeah,
I
I see
agree. I
your
agree.
tattoo.
I agree.
And so I know Marvel, this is their big thing, is creating an expanded universe in the movies. And you're seeing guys show up in each other's movies, but one character isn't just playing in one movie. He's playing in multiple movies because there's more to that character
Yeah.
that we get to learn about.
Yeah, I love how they're building out the universe. You know, they're kind of building the foundation with Captain America, Iron Man, and then from that they're just expanding it, and they're not like saying, "Hey, let's start that over because that was bad. Let's start this over." They're just, let's take our time, let's build these characters, let's grow it and grow it and grow it, and now we're at Captain America: Civil War, which is going to have a ton of characters in it. We're having Infinity War Part 1 and 2 come out in a little bit. So I love that about that. I wish DC would take a little bit of a note with the whole taking your time thing, because we are getting a Wonder Woman film.
But it's not a sequel.
It's not a sequel.
It's a prequel. They're only 3 movies in, and they're already hitting up the prequels.
Right.
I feel like the reason why you would need to do a prequel in that situation is because you introduced a character
Too
soon without knowing anything about that character.
Didn't take your time.
And so now, instead of doing a sequel to continuing that story, you have to go back to the beginning.
It's almost like you're kind of taking a backtrack. You're backtracking.
Right.
You're not moving forward. You're taking 2 steps back.
Right. Now,
to get back to where we are.
We like prequels. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
But sometimes the reason why you have to do it is because there's a lot of holes in the story that we just don't know anything. We don't know the motivation. We don't know how this person got to this point. And so now you're going to have to backtrack and go back to the beginning. But a few examples of good things with prequels, the Star Wars trilogy. I mean, there were some good things and not great things about it. But you know, we love the original trilogy, episodes 4 through 6.
Yes.
But we wanted to know about Darth Vader's origin story and
Yes.
how he came about. And so they took their time and made those 3 movies, which were great. They told that story, fleshed out that storyline. And then another one that's actually coming out, another prequel movie is Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which exists in the Harry Potter world. That takes place
like 70 years
before
prior Harry Potter's story, not even in Hogwarts, in New York City.
Okay.
So
I mean, we've seen the Harry Potter
nice.
world universe being told, and very well done. And now we're getting to go back and see a little bit more of that expanded universe.
because they took their time with Harry Potter.
Right.
A whole couple million movies of Harry Potter.
Right.
So they're not filling in holes. They're just saying, hey, we did this right. We took our time. Let's go back and explore something else. Let's tell a new story that actually happened before Harry Potter.
Right. And now another sequel that kind of came out, kind of a sequel remake, again, was Jurassic World.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, Jurassic World was not a reboot. They did not start over and just do Jurassic Park all over again and give it a different name. They said, hey, Jurassic Park happened.
It did.
The next 2 movies happened after that. And now we're just going in a new direction, fresh take, but we're using the source material.
Yes.
And now they're actually making a sequel to Jurassic World that's probably coming out in the next few years, which I'm excited about. Jurassic World with Chris Pratt was excellent. Love him in Guardians of the Galaxy, which we're getting a sequel to that.
Oh, my goodness.
And actually, Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel, talked about Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in Phase 4, which he talked about today a little bit, teased that. So
you just went on a mind-blowing rant right there.
I did.
Of just connecting all the dots.
So with sequels, there's so much to look forward to.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what's great about being a fan is that you're always looking for more. You're looking, all right, where are they going next? And they're giving you that. And it gets us excited, gets us pumped up. There's so much to look forward to with movies and TV shows of what they're going to do next.
I think the cool thing about remakes, I think I like remakes more than I like reboots. Because I feel like a remake is coming from a place with more of a foundation that's, taking from the comics or taking from the original writers, and they're just reimagining, they're continuing the story, they're putting a fresh spin on it. So I enjoy remakes a little bit better because they take the time with the story, you know? And if you're watching a movie, like, sure, cool, we want there to be cool fight scenes and awesome visual effects, but if we don't have a good story, like, you're not going to have a good movie.
Right.
So give us good stories. Or if you're a story writer, give us good stories. Write those awesome stories, you know, that have a foundation, that if you're writing a story and you're just going to have to reboot it, then it's probably not a good story.
Right.
Like, take your time, make it awesome so you don't have to scrap it and start over again.
I know sometimes we get reboots and remakes because technology has changed over the years, and now we get to see these characters in a little bit clearer sense of who they are, with using CGI and getting to do fight scenes that you wouldn't been able to do before, with weapons and superpowers and things like that. So sometimes it's time to do a reboot or a remake so that they can give us the best version of that character. So sometimes it's necessary to do that.
Great point, Sam. Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode on the social geek scene. I'm Jeremiah. That's Sam. That's him right there. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can geek out together. If you have any comments about reboots, remakes, sequels, and prequels, oh my, leave them in the comments below. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, connect with us on the socials, and online at socialgeekscene.com.